From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, welcome to another edition of the McLaughlin Group. I'm your host, Tom Rogan. This week's panelists are the familiar faces of Eleanor Clift, Clarence Page, and Pat Buchanan. And our special guest this week is Kelsey Bolar. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thanks for having me.
On that note, we shall get to our first issue, which is issue 1, Biden at home.
The battle to secure your family's health care. The battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country. And the battle to save our planet by getting climate under control.
Joe Biden has a long wish list of programs and policies he intends to enact during his White House tenure. But with Republicans looking likely to retain control of the Senate, how much of what Biden wants will he really be able to do? And how will Biden balance his agenda with that of the increasingly powerful Democratic Party left?
Pat, your thoughts on how President-elect Biden will approach the first 120 days of his presidency in terms of balancing these competing domestic interests?
I think Joe Biden is under a real imperative. He's got to get stuff up to the hill that can pass muster with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. I think he might go ahead with infrastructure, but if he's talking about the rest of it, you mean the popular option, as he calls it, and you get the other items, reparations, the Black Lives Matter options, AOC options, and all the rest of it, the end of the filibuster, all the defund the police, all of these things I think are going to go out the window. They're not going to be attempted because he doesn't have the votes on the Republican side. So I think what he's going to do is go with what he can get, and you're going to have a very unhappy left wing of the Democratic Party.
Eleanor, your thoughts?
I don't recall Joe Biden campaigning on what Pat just referred to as the Black Lives Matter options and the AOC options and the defund the police option. He didn't campaign on any of that. He did campaign on making prescription drug costs affordable, and that is something that he could get support in the Republican caucus. You could have the Congress repeal the fact that Medicare is not allowed to negotiate drug prices. The president will be taking office at a time when the pandemic is presumably still raging. I think there will be an appetite to pass COVID relief for businesses, for getting more money for testing, and maybe even for bailing out, Republicans use that word, for states and cities that are burdened by the costs of the pandemic. I think infrastructure's, Pat's right about that. There is room for agreement there. And through infrastructure, you can provide a lot of green jobs, and you can begin to translate policy through a lens that acknowledges the climate change that is facing this country. So I think there's opportunity here, and I think the president-elect, when he becomes president, needs to move quickly. I think he's already moving quickly, and I think he so far has basically made all the right steps with very little cooperation from the outgoing Trump administration.
Kelsey, how are we going to pay for this, if at all?
That's a good question, Tom, and a question that you don't often hear Joe Biden or any Democrats answer. I think what we're going to see Republicans are able to hold on to the Senate is a lot of executive actions, executive orders, because he will face an uphill battle getting any sort of big package legislation through a Republican-controlled Senate. If he does compromise, which I don't doubt he has some intention to do on certain policy issues, I think he risks losing support among that AOC wing of the party that is unwilling to compromise with the moderate Democrats or Republicans. That's really not anywhere in their agenda, and that wing of the Democrat Party is certainly becoming more prominent. And so I think a lot of this is going to end up happening through the executive branch. If Republicans hold on to the Senate, there's something called the Congressional Review Act, which actually could slow down Joe Biden's ability to roll back a lot of the deregulatory efforts.
Clarence, your thoughts on what to expect from those first 120 days?
the stock market went up partly because some on Wall Street were happy that gridlock may return. And they benefit from that because Washington likes predictability. But at the same time, Mitch McConnell likes to do things once in a while, too. And if he goes and lays down, well, for one thing, I don't think he's going to treat Biden like he treated Barack Obama, saying right away that our number one goal is to make him a one-term president. I think the two of them know how to work together. They both had experience in the Senate, more experience. And Joe Biden's always been a meet him halfway kind of guy. He likes to negotiate. It's like Mitch McConnell likes to negotiate. He's gotten out of the habit of it lately. But at the same time, I don't expect big spending. Kelsey is right that Democrats haven't talked much about how to pay for things, but Republicans haven't either since Donald Trump has been president. And I think we're going to see some more concern about the fiscal side, but maybe not that much.
Well, let me say, Tom, let me just say, look, the Biden tax bill is dead. The Green New Deal is dead. Medicare for all is dead. Many of these big programs, reparations, are certainly dead. DC statehood is dead. Puerto Rican statehood is dead. Ending the filibuster is dead. If you got Mitch McConnell there, it's clearly a case of Joe Biden has got to sit down with Mitch McConnell and say, Mitch, what do you want done? We both want COVID-19 dealt with. Now I can work with you on a program. He needs to find a way, and he's got a real problem, to satisfy the left wing of his party when he's sitting there working with Mitch McConnell every week. And to do that, he's going to have to go to the executive orders.
Eleanor.
Well, of course he's going to go to executive orders, and they have them all laid out, and he's going to use those powers every bit as much, I hope, as Donald Trump did. Secondly, there are some things that he can do with Mitch McConnell. If McConnell would put the voting rights bill up for a vote, it's named after John Lewis, that would pass. Also, progressives, you've named, Biden didn't run on the Green New Deal. He didn't run on reparations. Those are not commitments that he has made. So you can't start grading him on not getting through commitments he never even made. But he will be graded on following through with his pledge to get the pandemic in check and with providing economic relief. And as far as the progressives in the party, Elizabeth Warren likes to say personnel is policy, and they have submitted 400 names for sub-cabinet positions to get people in place that know what needs to be done, and you can accomplish a lot through regulatory change.
Kelsey, one of the things that perhaps conservatives are looking to with fingers crossed is the idea of, President Trump's judicial appointments acting as perhaps a restraining influence for the growth of the administrative state, for example, which would be implied by major executive action, at least in domestic policy. Your thoughts on that potential component of what we're about to see?
Absolutely. Well, Eleanor is right. That personnel is policy. And that's why keeping an eye on the type of nominations and placements the Biden transition team looks to put in place is very important. Are they placing more of these AOC-like figures into prominent positions? Or is Joe Biden being serious when he says he wants to be a president, even for those who didn't vote for him? Now, Elizabeth Warren, I think, would love a prominent position in the Biden administration, but we know that the policies she supports are far more radical, if you want to use that word, than what Joe Biden claims to support. So, at a certain point, Joe Biden's going to have to put his money where his mouth is, and it's going to become very clear what type of administration he's going to run. And I'm sorry, but with someone like Kamala Harris sitting right beside him, who was ranked the most left-wing member of the United States Senate, I think we can expect some of the policies that he didn't necessarily campaign for to make appearances in the next 2 years.
By the way, Barack Obama was rated the most liberal in the Senate as well. I mean, he didn't turn out too badly unless you happen to be a conservative. But nevertheless, I think that Joe Biden wants to get $15 an hour minimum wage passed. He wants issues that reach out to blue-collar workers, to the folks who used to be the Democratic Party's firm base, and Donald Trump was whittling a lot of it away because Democrats haven't been talking that much to labor folks, organized labor, to blue-collar folks, to displaced non-college workers, as the demographers call them.
Very quick,
Clarence,
Pat.
you raised a good issue. With this middle American workers, white working class folks, they've been murdered by free trade. They've been murdered by jobs being sent overseas. They oppose all these trade deals. They support Trump on these issues. Are Democrats going to move to pick up those guys by saying we're bringing those manufacturing jobs home?
Okay.
I actually think Biden has made that promise, and he's got a Buy America commitment for all contractors. And I would like to point out that 7 nations led by China just signed a big trade deal. You know, when Obama was president, he negotiated a trade deal that would have excluded China. So
let's get on to that, Eleanor, because you can continue your thoughts. The foreign policy is coming. I would say one interesting thing to look for as we talk about that $15 minimum wage, how does that affect small business, medium-sized businesses post-COVID? You know, it'll be a great test of economic theory. Anyway,
you want an answer? You want an answer?
Well, let's wait and see. We'll wait for the facts and then we'll discuss them. All right. Issue 2.
No, don't wait for the facts, Tom.
Don't wait for the facts. This is the fact-free era.
All right.
I'll give you an answer, Tom. The real minimum wage is higher than the legal minimum wage already.
Okay. Well, didn't work so great in Seattle.
De facto versus de jure.
Okay. All right. We will move on. Right. Issue 2, Biden abroad.
No country, even one as powerful as ours, can go it alone in the challenges of the 21st century. They respect no borders and cannot be contained by any walls.
The president-elect says that he's determined to strengthen America's alliances and engage the world on shared challenges. But facing a rising China and nuclear proliferation challenges from Iran and North Korea, some wonder whether Biden's presidency will be shaped by events rather than shape them.
Eleanor, you were just discussing the idea of President Obama's trade record, and actually, much to Pat's chagrin, I am much more in favor of that TPP than perhaps other conservatives. But how do you see a Biden presidency on those early foreign policy days?
Well, it's America first, but it's not America alone. And he's going to renew all the traditional trade alliances. And I mean, I would look at Boris Johnson in the UK, look at him slow walking Brexit. There may be a no deal Brexit. I mean, Trump's defeat has sent a signal to the world that kind of strident right-wing populism is not necessarily going to pay off. And I think Biden knows these different leaders, and that counts for something. And, right now, I'm sure President Putin and President Xi are sitting back and enjoying all the discord in this country over the president's refusal to accept the outcome of the election for so long. We with that discord are doing the work of our enemies. And I think Biden has an enormous opportunity here because climate change is at the top of everyone's agenda. You don't have to be a scientist to understand that it's threatening the life of the planet. And so I think our foreign policy going forward will also be seen through the lens of climate change.
Pat.
Climate change is not at the top of the agenda of Xi Jinping. The idea of making China the most powerful nation in Asia, of driving the Americans out of the region and becoming the first nation on earth, that's what's driving him. What is Biden going to do about the drive in the South China Sea? Is he going to confront the Chinese there? What Joe Biden has basically done is giving a war guarantee for a little grouping of rocks about 100 miles north of Taiwan. Does anybody think the United States should go to war with communist China to defend these rocks or Japan's entitlement to them? I think Joe Biden is going to inherit the real world.
But we have seen, Clarence, in terms of, if we can believe the reporting, the Wall Street Journal talking about Joe Biden almost seeming to say that there's room to allow North Korea to be a nuclear power. I mean, a lot of this we don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. But what do you expect?
They called President Xi a thug, didn't he? I mean, Joe's already started with the tough talk. I don't think he wants to start World War III over there, but he has indicated that we've been too soft on China, in his view, both in trade and in the politics of that hemisphere. But it's a very complicated problem. I don't need to tell you. You know more about China than I do, Tom. But it's a very complicated problem, but I think Joe Biden can handle it. He knows it. He was former chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. He's very familiar with these grounds. His rise was welcome in Europe, where President Trump has alienated more than he's made friends. I mean, it goes on. I'm very confident of his ability in foreign relations. But the real question is, how do you deal with the unpredictable Chinese government?
Kelsey, do you think on these foreign policy issues, I mean, what do you think will be the main conservative point of critique? The effort to return to the Iran deal, Paris Accord? I mean, what do you think conservatives will mobilize against most?
On the foreign policy front, we're going to see a complete flip-flop in strategy. I think a few decades from now, I'm confident that Americans from both sides of the political spectrum are going to look back on President Trump's foreign policy record and give him the credit that nobody's given him, at least from the left side of the aisle right now, between the Middle East peace agreements, between the fact that we were told before President Trump was taking office, we were going to have nuclear war with North Korea, Iran, or both, and neither has happened. And then also he stood up to China, which, look, Joe Biden was President Obama's right-hand man. Neither of them did that during their administration, so why should we expect anything different right now? On top of that, yes, Joe Biden is going to re-enter a lot of these feel-good international peace agreements, whether it's the Paris Climate Accord or the UN Human Rights Council, which actually graded the United States. It gave the United States more recommendations for human rights improvements that they need to make than countries like Cuba and China and Iran.
Who wants to jump in?
Withdrawal from the world stage is not leadership. I think what President Biden is going to do is to restore America's standing in the world as a leader, and that's the competition with China. It's an economic competition, and it's a competition over, who's number one. And that's been in great dispute with Trump, who has withdrawn from the world, put up the drawbridges. On his way out the door, he's been withdrawing troops from three places, I guess, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia, which I don't disagree with, but he does it abruptly without consulting the allies that also have troops in these places. He was contemplating a strike on Iran to take out their nuclear facility, which, one, you couldn't really do with a strike, and two, would launch us into a war. He was fortunately talked out of that, but we still have a number of days before he leaves office where he's going to try to make some spectacular show of foreign policy strength without thinking anything through. So I think we're in a dangerous period.
I don't think it's true that President Trump has withdrawn from the international stage. What's true is that he has put his foot down and stood up to international leaders, many of whom were very bad actors. He put America first, not just for America, but for the good of a lot of these other countries where human rights abusers were being enabled and emboldened.
All right, Pat.
He sure put his foot down with the North Korean leader, didn't he?
Let's go to Pat.
Well, let's take that up on what Eleanor said.
Okay.
North Korea has developed nuclear weapons under George W. Bush. It's developed missiles to deliver them. It's now enhanced these missiles to where they may be able to reach the United States. But who exactly is going to take the nuclear weapons away from North Korea? They've got them, and you're not going to take them away from them. And I don't think Joe Biden's got the foggiest idea how to do it, and I don't think the American government does. These are intractable problems.
Joe Biden was in the White House for 8 years when they kept that program capped. Just saying.
Hey, why didn't he get the missiles taken away from him and and the atomic weapons.
Who are going to take missiles from?
All right. Missiles.
That's why everybody wants nuclear missiles, because they know you're not going to take them away.
Exactly.
Without starting another world war.
Clarence hits the nail on the head. But we are going to move on to our third issue, final issue, which is, or at least final issue in this sort of sphere. Issue 3, GOP strategy.
I don't know. At the risk of bragging, it wasn't very close.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is confident that he will retain his position come January. After all, Republicans are optimistic that they will hold control of the Senate after 2 Georgia Senate runoff races are concluded. But how will Republicans approach their dealings with President Biden? Will resistance be the rule or compromise the new condition?
Clarence, your thoughts on how Republicans are going to play this one?
I think there's a situation now, and we're all trying to figure out, will the Republicans still be in control? I think they probably will after the Georgia runoffs. But there's going to be a lot of dealing going on, or at least attempted dealing, because Joe Biden, as I mentioned earlier, is the kind of guy that likes to meet people halfway. He does have an impatient progressive wing on his party, but at the same time, they're not the one. Well, he's got to keep them on board and interested, but they can't run the show if you're not getting anything through Congress. If you're not getting anything that Republicans can at least cut a deal on. So I expect that's going to be the course. How successful they're going to be remains to be seen.
Pat.
And what Mitch McConnell is going to do is he's going to take a look at everything Joe proposes, sends up to the Congress, and he's going to look at it and say, is it consistent with and consonant with Republican principles? Do we get enough out of this deal, say on infrastructure, that we can go along with it? And if it's ideologically liberal, ideologically left, his whole caucus will stand behind him and he'll say, we're going to kill it. We're not going to vote on it. So Mitch McConnell is in the catbird seat here. And I don't think anything's going to get through that he opposes. And Joe Biden knows this. And Joe Biden is a pragmatist. I think he's going to say, Mitch, what can you accept? Can we get this or that? AOC, Bernie, BLM agenda is off the table. And that's what's going to, well, I'll get to that in my prediction.
Okay. And Eleanor, Joe Biden also knows that another Joe is waiting in the wings, Joe Manchin, who might not shine onto some of this other stuff as well.
Right. How many times has Pat said BLM agenda, defund the police in the course of this show? Those are the new talking points, I gather. I can make the case for Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden as deal makers. I think this is going to be McConnell's last term. He's 78. He's not going to run again, presumably in 6 years. He's gotten all the judges he wants. There aren't any more vacancies to fill. Does he really want to go down as the turtle and the person who blocks everything, the killing field? He might want some of that legislation to get credit for some of it. Right. So I can make that case. I can also make the case for him just squatting there and saying no to everything that Biden offers and hoping that 2 years in, the midterm massacre will give him fuller control. Right. I hope it's the former. I have great hope. And Biden needs to use the bully pulpit. He's got 5 million more votes. He's got a mandate from the American people to address the country's problems.
Okay, Kelsey, about 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Look, after being called racists, bigots, deplorables for the last 4 years, I'll tell you the Republican conservative base isn't going to have a heck of a lot of tolerance for feel-good compromise. That said, I do hope that Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell can find areas of agreement where they can pass policies that are good for the American people. But there's not going to be a whole lot of tolerance for a lot of the feel-good rhetoric that you're hearing from Joe Biden right now.
All right. Well, we can dream. We'll see. Anyway, predictions, Pat.
We've already begun to hear AOC say she doesn't know if she wanted to run again. She's unhappy with what's going on. I predict that by the spring, you'll have a full-bore revolution of resistance by the left wing of the Democratic Party. And Eleanor, I'll mention again, Black Lives Matter will be.
All right, I do.
As we're all. But they're going to rebel. They're not going to take this.
Eleanor. This is a drinking game. Every time you mention it. My prediction, more red states, will issue mask mandates following Iowa and North Dakota. The pandemic is out of control. The least we can do is wear a mask to protect ourselves and protect others.
Kelsey.
Well, at risk of triggering Eleanor, I'm going to predict that Joe Biden is not going to know what to do about the Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa. I unfortunately fear and yes, predict that we are going to see more of this chaos, protests, and often violent riots on the streets of our American cities.
Okay, Clarence.
Well, Jim Clyburn, who was a founder, one of the founders of SNCC, along with John Lewis and others, said he and Lewis were talking before Lewis died about the defund the police slogan, and they both compared it to "Burn Baby Burn" back in the '60s as a slogan that pardon the pun, raised flames for about a year and then faded away. I think the same thing is going to happen now. But my prediction is Donald Trump is not going to buy a TV network. He might release his name out for one, but he will announce his coming speaking tour as soon as we get past the current frivolities.
Okay, I predict that as very soon after Joe Biden enters office, North Korea will either offer a summit to Joe Biden in the vein of Trump or a missile test in the vein of ICBMs. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.